Good morning to you. This is a special day for a lot of people because for the first time in their lifetime, they now know that there's a rocket ship on its way around the Earth and then around the moon and then coming back. Of course, I'm old enough to remember the day that they actually landed on the moon. And apparently the amount of computing power they had to do that was less than what I've got in this cell phone. It was risky then, and it seemed risky yesterday when they did this, but it's truly an amazing thing that people can do when you put, I don't know how many thousands of people together that are capable of doing each of their little part and doing what needs to be done. And that leads me to have a yearning for all of the people around the world. It depends on how you count them, but certainly more than 1 billion people who I believe will eventually have a home in heaven. And my neighbor this past week, and she is a very fine woman, and I enjoy her, but she's not the least bit interested in the faith. But we had some people knock on both of our doors about their particular faith perspective. And I said that I really respect the fact that you're out there doing it, spreading what you believe to be true. It's just I'm at all convinced that you're right. And I said, what did you say to them? And she said, well, I said, I believe in one God and that and some other things. And I said, well, where'd you get that? How do you know there's only one God? The Hindus believe that there's millions and millions, over 30 million gods. How do you know there's one God? And she kind of got into there you go again, Gary. And I kind of laughed at her. She said, the way I see it, I die and I go, and if there's a God and I stand before him and he says, Gary was right and you were wrong, then I lose. And I said, well, the way I see it is that a better alternative for you would to believe that there's absolutely nothing after death. That would give you more comfort now, because then you wouldn't even have to worry about facing a judgment, because death would end it all. And if that scenario is true and I come to the end of my life and I'm wrong, then death ends it all. I got nothing. But if you're wrong, then you're headed for a very, very bad eternity. And she understood the logic of that, but wasn't real quick on the whole business of paying attention. Somehow we've got to get it better. And I, once again, gave her a personal invitation to my church. And sadly, for me and for her, we're working with a church in another town. So on top of the overall resistance, there's this resistance of, well, that's, I'm not going to go that far kind of thing. But she did say she appreciated the fact that I did invite her. I didn't tell her that she could come and watch our service online. And that's the subject that we're going to get to today, although we do broadcast our service online, and we do have many hundreds of Facebook friends. I do know that it's not a very effective way of doing things. So I can't help myself. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag before we get anywhere. How effective is online church? Now, I'm going to allow us to use that term, online church, but I don't really believe it. I don't believe there is such a thing. So why? Well, this verse from the New Living Translation, it's a familiar verse to Christians, and there are many verses in the Bible that are like this. But it says that don't neglect the meeting together as some people do. We're going to drill down on that a little later. One of the interesting things that Jesus said is, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there in the middle. And he said this while he was there on earth, while he was here on earth. That's just interesting to understand that. How was Jesus there if he hadn't yet ascended to heaven and hadn't yet sent the Holy Spirit? That's above my pay grade. I can't even begin to fathom how you sort out some of those ambiguities that are there in Scripture. But there's nothing ambiguous about this. Now, I've explained to you before, if I can get my mouse going here properly, we're drilling down on the master plan of evangelism, but I've been off the campus and I can't help myself. Sometimes I see things that Coleman introduced, and this book is not very long and you should get it and you should read it. But I see so many forks that go out from there that I think is very important for us to delve into, especially given the complexities of our world. Of course, when Coleman wrote this book in 1963, he didn't even anticipate how to answer the question of how do we deal with the internet and how do we deal without cell phones. We wouldn't have cell phones today if they hadn't have had the technology developed because of things that flowed out from the technology of going to the moon. We live in a very, very different world, but many things stay the same. So I'm going to give you some statistics that I've gathered together, and admittedly, these are from a variety of sources and surveys that are not always as scientific as they claim to be. Because, for example, if you do an online survey and you report the results, you've actually selected out of the human population the subset of people who would go online, period, and many don't, and while online would get to the place where they could do the survey that you've done. So many of the statistics that you see are skewed by that fact, by the people who self-selected into this surveying group. It still gives you some sense of the reality, even if you can't drill down deep on all of the actual statements that they make about the facts. So here we're going to deal with some stuff. But first of all, I want to get to my bottom line, and I hope it's your bottom line too. According to this one verse in the Bible and the implications of all of the rest of the Bible, the writer of Hebrews, we don't know who it was. If you had a King James version, it probably says it was Paul, but it's probably not Paul. Let's not neglect our meeting together. Okay, full stop. We're done. Online, there isn't a together. There may be the same information transmission, but if a person is sitting there by themselves with a computer, they're not meeting together. If they're sitting there with their family, they're not meeting together as the whole church. Therefore, it doesn't qualify as going to church. There's not a chance in the world, from my perspective, that the online business that we do is equivalent to church meeting. I'm going to give you some stats on that in a few moments. A verse goes on to say, as some people do. So they had neglect of meeting back in the day of the New Testament. Now, this person who knocked on my door for perpetuating her own religion, I won't mention it, but she said, in our group, everybody believes the same. I'm the daughter of a Baptist pastor, and he gave me permission when he was alive to go my own way. I'm sure he wasn't happy about it. But she said, everybody in our group believes exactly the same. And I said, I know too much about humanity to believe that that could even possibly be true. And I believe that what she was referring to was with some level of honesty, but superficiality as well. Some people will always neglect meeting because there is something in our fallen nature that makes us resist doing it. Why? Well, there's any number of reasons. It could be that we just have an awkward relationship with somebody. We might think that it's boring. There's so many things. I've got to cut my grass today instead of... You can come up with any number of excuses to not meet together. Some people do. But encourage one another. You see the contrast there. You can't encourage one another without meeting together. That's what the verse plainly states. But encourage one another instead of neglecting meeting and saying, well, I can watch it online later this week and so on. No, that will not be encouraging. And so you are under instructions, if you follow the Bible, to be an encourager. And even if you're absolutely deaf and blind and in a wheelchair, and can barely keep track of your own memory, you still, by your very presence, are encouraging one another. So don't stop it. If you can possibly do it, don't stop it. And don't say, well, I can't get anything out of it because I don't like the music because I don't understand the words. Like, it doesn't matter. You encourage people by being there and put a smile on your face, and that by itself is an encouragement. And the writer of Hebrews says, especially now, as we see the day of his coming drawing near, they had the sense in the New Testament church that Jesus was coming back very, very soon. And I think that anticipation is always a good perspective to have in every age. And we know that he hasn't come back yet, and they were wrong in holding that expectation. But, we hold a lot of expectations for a lot of things in life. And expecting Jesus to come back is one that we should hold strongly. And that he could come any day is an encouragement to get yourself moving to do the things that you have this innate resistance to doing. Well, here's what's going on in church right now. Somewhere around 2 in 5, a third of people, 40% maybe, attend monthly in the once a month. That's not meeting together. So we have a failure rate that has grown over time in the frequency. Even though people say I attend regularly, they don't attend as regularly. And that's true of the live thing. But are they avoiding attending church regularly and just staying home and watching online? Bottom line is no, not statistically. There are some who do that and say, well, I could stay home in my pajamas and watch online. And besides, it's rainy today. Not very many people are. At the same time, about a quarter of people do plug into a church service online once a month. And I go and poke around on some other people's sites and see what they're doing. And quite frankly, I don't find them terribly engaging. But those people who do watch online, they also continue to go to church. So you're not reaching as many people as you want. They're actually just reviewing what happened on Sunday. Well, it's not a bad idea to hear the same stuff twice. So, there's that about it. But the participation rate has not, since we got out of the abnormal situation of the pandemic, it has not dropped that much. So about 17% of the people, 1 in 5 roughly, attend both formats regularly. I find that somewhat encouraging. If they found it encouraging live, they didn't say, well, I don't want to go back and do that again. That's a repeat. They actually do want to go, but 1 in 5 actually do want to go back and see it again. I very rarely watched a movie twice. And if I get into some that I watched 20 years ago and I say, oh, I've already seen this, and then I just stop because I don't want to go through the same thing again. Very rarely do I do that. But apparently, about nearly 1 out of 5, or 1 out of 6, 1 out of 6, however way you want to say it, do go back and view something online. And I find that encouraging that you've got that subset within the church that are finding it sufficiently engaging and challenging, or whatever it is they find in it inspiring, to do it twice. That's pretty good. Only about 1 in 10 say, well, I go to church online, I don't have to go live. That's a very rare person. That may come as a shock to you because you might see, well, our attendance is falling, so people are staying home and watching online. No, that's not what they're doing. They're staying home and doing something else, or going somewhere, or shopping, or whatever it is that they think is more important. Don't do that. And most people are not. So what's happening here is that the online stuff that we present is a supplement to attending live. Now, I would argue for you, and I hope that I don't use up too much time here to get to making this point in the end. We should be using the internet. We should be using online, but I'm not so sure that we should be broadcasting our whole services, or at least not emphasizing that. So when given the choice, people say, I definitely, 3 out of 4, prefer to go to church in person. Well, that's a very encouraging thing because they found something in that attendance to be of value to them. Very few actually prefer just staying home and watching it. But when you're watching it by yourself, you're not attending church. You're attending a representation that has the same content, but church is much more than the flow of content. And people very rarely prefer online. Now, churches are broadcasting services. About 9 out of 10 are live streaming services. I don't think that's the best use of the internet. I don't really object to it, but I wouldn't want to make that the door of entry, particularly if the production quality is low. And I think the production quality should be low enough to not consume a lot of resources financially and people power doing it, because that's taking good people who are being faithful, who could be doing something much more productive. And most churches now are both doing online and live. It appears that this whole business of using the internet is permanent. So you have to get with the program in some way, just like we gave up horses and buggies and deal with automobiles. We're going to have to deal with what's here and what's going in the future. And I see in the news that the computerized system in China broke down, so the autonomous taxi cabs were just stopping with their lights flashing, blocking traffic the other day. There's always difficulties with new things, but we have to live in the world as we find it, not as we wish it was. 1960 is not coming back anytime soon. And so we've got to be forward-looking, tilted towards tomorrow while living today as well. And I think digital ministry is something that we should do. I just think we should do it differently. I think I doubled that one. The overall conclusion here is in-person is still what should dominate, and it is the preference of most people. However, most people are not attending every Sunday. So what we should be doing is building habit builders that encourage people to come next week. And you can say, I tell you all the problems, how to solve all the problems of the world. I'm overstating it to make a point, but you got to come back next Sunday to see that. Always get that next lamppost down the road in front of people. This is why it's important that you be here next week, because we're going to enhance what we've done this week, extend what we've done this week. And the reality is you probably need to repeat what you did this week, because most people, the majority of people who call your church their church home, were not there last Sunday. And you can't say this Sunday, well, as we covered last Sunday, but you were here. No, they're not there. Many are. Your very faithful people are there on a regular basis, but there are many others that aren't. So you got to find a way to repeat without being boring. That's kind of tricky, but you can do that. And you can kind of view it from a slightly different direction in your verbiage. They won't even know you're repeating the point. But we're used to repetition. You see ads online or on television. You see them over and over and over again. Why do they repeat the ad? Well, I had it on last week, so there's enough. No, they know that the more the ad repeats itself, the more likely that people are going to get it. So don't be afraid of continually building on repetition from what you did last week. If it was worth doing last week, it's probably worth repeating at least elements of it this week and going forward, so that you need to live in the world as it is, not as you wish it was. We wish that everybody was there every week, but they're not. So what are the outcomes of this whole business of online stuff? I resist calling it online church. It may be an maybe. I don't think the church service online is particularly a strong evangelistic outreach, but it may have some outcomes. There may be somebody who, as they would say in the car business, they kick the tires by seeing who you are online, far better that they see you in person. But you can lower the barrier for first exposure, and you can do, for example, this is not tuned to those people. There's something like this where it's mostly the human personality and maybe some words on the screen, maybe some images. And I think that this is a much better way to do it the way I'm presenting it to you now than to have, that little square down on the bottom you see where the face is there. You may as well make your face big. As ugly as your mug is, just like mine is ugly. It conveys more of the human personality. And I would say the more you put that front and center for somebody who may come to your website as opposed to seeing your online services, I'd bury those. I wouldn't necessarily take them off of YouTube, but I'd bury them further deeper so that on the front page they'd see you, kind of face to face. Because you've got to recognize that when you're in church, you are a long way from the participants. Therefore, your demeanor and your gestures are appropriate for a large group. And if they zoom in on you, you may seem a little strange to people. But what you've got to recognize is I am what I am, 18 inches from the camera right now. And the person on the other end is another 18 inches from the camera. So I've got to speak to the camera as if the person on the other side here is a yard away. Okay, a meter away. I'm Canadian. We are metric here. And that's a very different experience for the recipient. So when you give it to the recipient personally and look straight into the lens of the camera more often than not, then they're more likely to be stirred by the message. Now, we are quite capable of discounting that factor psychologically because we know that the crowd's there and so on. But it still means I'm talking to you personally, one person at a time. It isn't a crowd. It isn't a group experience. You have to treat it like an individual experience. So right now, potentially, billions of people can watch this video. Very few will ever see it. It's okay if, in fact, a few are impacted by it and it changes something in a positive direction for them. So, I don't know who you are. I'm talking to you. And maybe the day will come when we actually insert the person's name in the live video. It's amazing what is becoming capable, and every week something new is added to the basket of goods of what we can do online, and we need to do the best we can to put it out there for people, but not consume resources that belong to the personal business. Evangelism is one thing. Edification. Well, what's the best way to build people? Any research that's been done has said, hands down, live is always better. To the point that they've even measured people's blood pressure. Not blood pressure, pulse rate. I think I got that right. One of those things. They measured it with people in church, just sitting there passively doing church, and people are sitting at home passively watching. And in fact, the people who are there live have more animated physiology than the people who are at home watching. Go figure. That's because it's true then, is true now. Don't forsake it. Do stick with meeting with people. There's something about it. Do they grow? Do they, we are now sanctified. There's a sense of presence. There's a sense of progression and sanctification and a progression to the finality when we go to be with Jesus. How do we do in that growth outcome? There is no doubt about it that watching things online is insufficient to get us to grow. We need the habit formation that comes with accountability, with people working with one another. When you're meeting with people, it develops relationships. You can't really develop relationships strongly on a one-to-many relationship. You can't develop relationships using this if it's a one-to-one kind of a thing, but it's still nothing like being in person. Trust will develop much more if you're face-to-face. We have a trust deficit today where people don't know whether this is artificial. No, this is really me. It could pinch me. I'm here. But, I actually can take this with technology and make it so good that I'm talking with my own voice and my own face and my own normal expressions where my head bobs and does what I normally do. I can do that artificially right now. I don't do it, and I may do it as a matter of duplicating some reach at some point in time. And when it gets better, I may do that. But it will always be that face-to-face, real-to-real accountability grows when you're actually physically present with people. It's as one of my friends says, and I think he says it's kind of like kissing your wife through the screen door. I think that's a really very applicable. It's not bad. It's just not good enough. We've got to put the emphasis not in the shiny object of what the next new thing is, and there'll be a next new thing in artificial intelligence next week. You just promise yourself that. But it will not ever replace the human engagement. In making disciples, which is what we are commissioned to do, it's always better to do it in person. And if you siphon off their attention saying, oh, I can get that online, no, you can't. You need to be face-to-face, belly-to-belly, nose-to-nose with people for the whole of humanity to come across. And one of the very important things is one of the key things that Jesus did was he worked with his disciples, but have you ever noticed that he didn't work with his disciples directly all that much? He, with the other people who came and interrupted him, who got his attention while the disciples were observing his behavior. You can't teach people how to live in a classroom. You don't learn to swim in a classroom. You don't learn to ride a bicycle in the classroom. You don't learn anything much in a classroom other than the raw mechanics of it. That's what's wrong with our educational model, is that there's so much time sitting at desks, and even with all the technology and everything else, you've got to get out in the field and watch somebody do it, whether that's a medical doctor, to be watching a medical doctor do something live, and even better if they're right there beside the patient and doing something live with the person as they follow the person who's further down the road. It's seen much more clearly when you're there. You can't teach people how to answer objections. You have to set the example for them. And you'd be amazed at how much better you can get in conversation if you just keep practicing following what the other person in front of you, that mentor, is doing. You won't be like them. You shouldn't be like them unless you're an exact duplicate of them, which of course you're not. But you can learn from how they succeed and how they fail in the conversations. You can watch their body language. You can watch where their eyes go. You can pay very close attention and observe and learn from watching other people. That's the best possible way to make disciples. And that's what Jesus did. He said, basically, watch me. He said, follow me. He never really said, watch me. I don't recall him saying that. But he was in a situation where more often than in any other way, his disciples were watching him as he preached. When he preached the Sermon on the Mount, his disciples came to him and he taught the crowds. But the disciples were there watching Jesus in the context of the crowds. He was doing it for his disciples, much more than he was doing it for the crowds. So the evidence-based conclusions from studying stuff, with the caveat that I threw in there earlier that this is often a selective group, is that in-person is always strongest in evangelism and, in edification and in sanctification. And I would also definitely believe in evangelism. I think the evangelism impact of broadcasting online is way overrated. Unless you sit down with somebody and watch it with them. And a hybrid approach is what you want to do. But since most churches are small, they're smaller than people think they are, uh, the using resources and saying, well, we had this better camera and better that, and it was more professional, people would give more response. No, it doesn't make that much difference. What makes the difference is the people who are doing it. Even if you've got an old grainy camera, that's as good as a brand new high definition camera. Look, most people are going to watch what you do on a screen about this big, and therefore the resolution of it doesn't matter a whole lot. And the impact of it is not as strong as you wish it would. Now, this is true in selling things. You'll see all kinds of advertising and videos, short form vertical videos that are kind of fun and advertising some things. They are not nearly as effective as other means of communication. Face-to-face is the best. Email is actually much better than any social media stuff. So if you're going to build something for your church, learn to build on your email platform. And I got a project for you that I'll make available to you very soon when I get it all polished up so that it doesn't break, where it can take your stuff and translate it for you into something more usable for the broad-based situation where you can chop up maybe your best pieces of your sermon and zoom in on it if necessary and make it more appealing to people. We've got to come back to remembering the main functions of what the church is all about. And here are 4 words. We covered these last week. You can go back and get it from last week. And pretty soon we're going to have it so that you can find these things easier. But the fellowship, the koinonia, the gathering together is powerful. And one of the greatest powers of the church from an evangelistic perspective is not to say, watch us online, but come and see. And when people come, Jesus said, that's how they're going to know that you're really his disciples, if they come and they observe that quality that is mystical to them, that is actually encapsulated in the word love, that you really truly care, not superficial, hi, how are you, it's nice to see you, but that you're actually listening and paying attention. And when they observe you loving one another, it will make an impact on them. That's what Jesus said would make the impact. That's how they're going to know. And I believe that the power of the Holy Spirit operates through us in that room where we are gathered together. Witnessing, getting the message out there, a word used over and over in the New Testament. This has to be individual and collective, but here, Watch My Pastor is not nearly as good as you fumbling through whatever it was that you're going to say, saying, this is the way I see it. And it's not going to be monolithic. Every human personality is at different places, but when you are sincere and you say, I don't know if he's a sinner or not, but I used to be blind and now I see, that's really compelling. It was in the Gospel of John. It still is today. And it's this whole business of getting the message out by stating it in words, preaching and proclaiming it, putting it out. And that has an emphasis intellectually and emotionally on a one-way presentation. But it's not just content. It mixes in all of the human elements of emotions and relationships. And the best preaching always does that. And then service is a common thing in the New Testament. If you're not serving in some way, then you're not living the Christian life and you're not getting the joy that comes from that. Serve by walking across the room and across the street or whatever it is and talking to your neighbor or a friend from church. Service can include words. Many people need to be encouraged. Only the ones that are breathing. The rest of them don't need any encouragement. It's too late for them. But it's not too late for you to encourage a neighbor, a friend, somebody else, by getting out of your own self and your own needs, because you're not going to get as much encouragement as you wish you would get, no matter what, but that you become the encourager for others so they know you from them. So don't get distracted by shiny objects. There's going to be new ones. You know, I'm old enough to have seen so many new shiny objects come and go in the life of the church. I don't think the digital presence is going anywhere until Jesus comes back. But what do I know? Well, what I know is that the personal presence is what matters. I would encourage you to define your terms. I think I'll probably come back to this subject again with a little more definition next week. When you say online church, that's an oxymoron. That's the right way. It's wrong. There's no such thing as a church online. The church is the gathering, and the gathering can be small groups. It can be one-on-one, but it's the gathering. Gathering is so important. Hospitality is enjoined in the New Testament several times, and having hospitality, whether you have them over for a backyard barbecue. We don't have a barbecue, so we can't barbecue something. But that doesn't stop us from having people over for some burgers that are done on the stove. It's no big deal. People don't come for the food. They come for the relationships. And yes, if there's a gathering in it, it's in a backyard and it's a small group. And even if all you do is you have your neighbors say, it's our family habit that we say grace and thank God for the food. So I'd like to do that with you today before we start. People would be silent and reverent while you pray, and maybe that could be the whole, without anything else. He's saying, they're really nice people, and they didn't push their religion down my throat. You need to define your terms. That could be as a gathering where it's evangelistic. We could use the term church in connection with that, even though it's, on your deck outside of your house or wherever. We've got to make sure that we prioritize that which is the priority. I know a guy once who sold a church building, wanted to do better church. They talked the church into selling the church building and buying a trailer load of goodies with the sound system and the lights and the whole thing, and they were going to meet somewhere. That church broke down within a very few months, and that man left town and with his tail between his legs. And should he have sold the building? Maybe. I don't know. But what I do know is that buying all the toys didn't solve all the problems. And it never will. So I think that this emphasis from the New Testament is really important. That I have here on the screen before you from Philippians chapter 1, where it says, whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Not, I'll leave it up to the technology because it's easier, but the manner that's worthy, where you invest your entire personhood in the thing. And stand firm on the things that matter. And don't get distracted. Don't look for an easy way. Don't wish that things were easier. Just wish that you were better. Pray that the Lord will give you the boldness that you need to present him in the way that he should be presented. Striving, stretching, straining together. It's always going to be hard work to do the work of the Lord. When you do that, you will be amazed at what difference it makes. Not with everybody, not in the time frame that you would wish. Sometimes it takes years. But do what you can do to encourage other people, to associate with people more and more. Get out from behind your desk. Don't wear out your office chair before you wear out your shoes. Make sure that you do something every week, preferably every day if it's at all possible, to do something to make a difference in somebody else's life. And if everybody did that, it was in your church, if everybody did that every day, took that attitude, I'm going to portray the best attitude, not necessarily get in a gospel presentation, but I'm going to be the kind of person that other people find attractive as a personality. Then you'll be amazed at what God will do through you over time. And it may take decades before that seed actually sprouts, but often It happens much faster than that. So I want you to spread this message. This is not as strong as it could be. If you send the link to somebody, you subscribe and you send it to somebody, they may watch. But if you watch them, you watch together with them, you can engage in a very deep conversation. But what is church anyway? That's the discussion that you need to have that may encourage someone to say, wow, that's what church is. Then it's so much more than I ever dreamed of. We'll catch you next week.